Hey everyone, Carrie Beck here with Life Skills Leadership Summit, where we are going to be talking about an extremely important topic that is tools of learning, because I think all of you want your kids to be able to learn as an adult and not be dependent on a teacher or on you. And that's what Meredith Curtis is here to talk to us about. So welcome, Meredith. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this year's conference, and I love this topic we're talking about. I either call it Tools of Learning or the 7 R's, and they're just so helpful in staying focused and making the majors the majors and the minors the minors.
That's a great way to put it. We're going to dive into her 7 R's and how it can apply to your homeschool. But before we do that, could you just tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Yes, I would love to. So, my name is Meredith Curtis, and I am a pastor's wife. I'm the mother of 5 homeschool graduates, and I have 8 grandchildren that are perfect angels, and I feed them too much sugar. And so I love spending time with my grandchildren. I love to travel. I love to read. I love Jesus. That's probably the most important thing. And I'm a writer and a speaker and Carrie, I love creating curriculum. I love teaching. I love creating curriculum. I love writing Bible studies, studying the Bible. Probably one of my favorite things is I wrote a curriculum called Who Done It. It's my most popular book, and it basically is a high school English class that teaches teens how to write their own cozy mystery. And I actually started writing a cozy mystery series. I have 3 books in it so far. Tea Time Trouble, Pumpkin Patch Peril, and Old Fashioned Christmas Murder. So that's kind of, I kind of feels weird. Like I'm a pastor's wife, but I love murder mysteries. So
That's so funny. Okay, y'all, she has 2 interviews, and we've talked about the cozy mysteries in the last one. So y'all go listen to that. But I was just fascinated. I knew she taught the kids, but now she's written 3 of her own mystery books. And so I just think that is so exciting as well. Plus, her husband, does he have 4 books out now? How many
yes,
books?
he
Yeah.
does. Well, he actually has a 5th book that's not a fiction. It's called Forging Godly Men, and it's about
Oh, okay.
mentoring godly men. So, yeah, we'll try to get him to the next conference to talk about that because he's really excited.
That is really good. And but the other ones are novels. So he's got the
Yes,
4 novels plus
novels.
the one on raising our kids, our boys to be godly men. So,
Yes.
so today we're going to talk, well, and writing is part of what we're going to talk about, but let's back up. I know you either call it the tools of learning or the 7 R's. Sort of how did you discover these tools of learning or the 7 R's?
Okay, so I was in my early 40s and I had a 5-year-old, 6-year-old. It was during those years when my youngest was that age. My oldest was already um, graduating, in the process of graduating from high school, starting college. And so I had this wide range of 5 children, and my parents got really sick, Carrie. They were so sick, and they live 4 hours away. So I was constantly taking a trip down to South Florida. I live in Central Florida, and I would drive that 4 hours and stay with them a few days and then come home. And so I had to leave one of the older kids in charge of 1 or 2 of the younger ones and bring another older one with me with the younger one. And it was just very challenging. And of course, I was heartbroken because my parents were very sick. And so during that time, I had to just ask the Lord, what is the most important thing for my kids to get done? Because they're going to be doing school apart from me. And the other one, we're going to be in the hospital, or we're going to be in doctor's offices, or we're going to be taking care of my parents. And I need to be able to, at a glance, know that they're getting it. So I really need help, Lord. And that is, you know, this is kind of birth from that. So, you think about the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. So this is kind of what I felt like I discovered as a homeschool mom, that these were the tools of learning, the majors, and that if some of the other stuff fell by the wayside, these tools that I kept focusing on were going to allow them to learn anything at all that they needed. So that was how it happened. It was a really sad season in my life, and my mom ended up passing away. My father moved close to us, and then 2 years later, he passed away. So it was a very hard season, but out of that, the Lord taught me not just life lessons, but this homeschooling lesson. So God always brings
Mm.
good things out of very sad things. Does that make sense?
It sure does. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And yet I see it because that you got to take care of the majors and let go of things. And there are seasons in homeschooling, seasons in our lives that, no, you may not go to every activity or every art lesson or whatever. You've got to just take care of the majors. So I know that you and I, there's one thing in particular, even beyond academics, and that's relationships. So why would you say relationships are so foundational to everything else?
Well, I think that life is basically number one thing relationship. God says he wants to have a relationship with us. In Revelation, he stands at the door and knocks. And if anyone hears his voice, he comes in and eats with them. And it just what you only eat with people you like, you know what I mean? Like that's relationship. And so I think we have a relational God. He created people to be relational and learning. I think when learning is birthed out of strong relationships, it is so different because I love Jesus. So I want to learn because I want to glorify him. I want to know what did he create and how does things work? And it fast when I became a Christian at 16, learning was a whole new thing for me. It just fascinated me. What is God doing in history? What is he doing here? And so I think when relationships are strong, so that's the vertical relationship, but my relationship with my children, if my children know how much I love them, how much I respect them, how much I want their life to be blessed and fulfilled, they're going to be motivated to learn, not just for me, but with me. And we're going to, I think we learn as a family. I didn't know everything when I started homeschooling. I loved learning along the way. And every time we went back through US geography, I learned more. And so I think that when relationships are strong and in contrast to that, when relationships are bad and there's yelling and there's always going to be fighting in a home, especially if you have more than one child, there's going to be fighting. But how you resolve it can be resolved in a way that they can be closer afterward. But if there is constant bickering, if your children don't feel like you're for them, if you don't have a high opinion of your children, you're frustrated with them, learning doesn't really take place well. They might be
Mhm.
learning, but so often in those situations, I see people, kids memorizing facts for a test, but they don't enjoy learning. Whereas I have just had some of my middle school classes that I teach online. These kids, they're not shy yet, like some of the high schoolers are shy, but they're just, oh, I love learning. And I think they have a family that home that's happy, that they feel loved by their family, and it always bears it out when they talk about their parents, they talk about their siblings, it's positive. So I think relationships set the atmosphere, but also all the studies I've ever read, the most confident people know that they're loved. And when our children know that they're loved, it gives them a confidence that they can learn anything. So,
So good, so good. And really, relationships are what's going to last forever and ever. I mean, even beyond this earth. And so we want to build those good relationships. Plus, sometimes, later in life, kids, their siblings, they may need their siblings to be there for them. And we need to build that relationship and that security so that when they take that risk to go learn something that they're not really sure if they know how to go learn it, then they still feel safe in doing that. I
Absolutely.
know, yes, I know you've got these 7 R's. So first, can you just sort of rattle them off real quickly for us? So we've mentioned
Yes.
them, but I don't know that we've really listed what they are, so people sort of have an understanding of what we're talking about.
Okay, so it would be relationships, reading. I call it rhetoric. It's really communication and thinking, and then writing, research, and oh, I missed one. Research. Oh, arithmetic. I forgot that one. And right living. So right living or righteousness, depending
Oh, yeah.
on your
There's a
Bible
lot of
version.
R's right there. We're going to dive into
Yes.
some of these. And you mentioned rhetoric, and that's a term that's sometimes thrown around. I believe that a couple hundred years ago, everyone really understood that because it was just part of education. And in the 20th century, we have really gotten away from that term. So tell us just a little bit about what that is and why that would be a tool of learning for our kids.
Okay, so rhetoric is basically communicating in a way to inform or persuade. So, rhetoric, Cicero wrote about rhetoric, Aristotle wrote about rhetoric, and people still read those. They're not really difficult reading, but and so some high school kids would enjoy reading those two men. They're both Romans. Well, Aristotle was Greek, Cicero was Roman, and it's basically being able to think through things and being able to communicate. So it would cover everything from greeting people and having casual conversations with them, saying, "Oh, Carrie, how are you today?" Things like that. And then it would go all the way to, watching the news and saying, "Okay, is this logical? Does this make sense? Does this jive with this over here?" And then being able to communicate in conversations, in even as far as speaking, eventually reading aloud, all those things to communicate clearly and concisely and graciously. So we have some really dynamic speakers in our day, Carrie, that are so ungracious. And sometimes I listen, I'm like, I agree with everything you say, but I wish you would be nicer, or you wouldn't use bad language. And so all of that is involved in rhetoric, the thinking and then what we allow to come through our mouth.
That is so good. And we need to teach our kids how to communicate instead of just regurgitate a bunch of facts,
Yeah.
which tends to be sort of it's not really education. It is a school system. And that's sort of what it like, even or write about it. It's like you got to check it off and you got to have my answers and not what someone else's are. And I could go off and tell y'all stories, but we're not going to. I sort of jumped straight to rhetoric and I overlooked reading because you sort of have to be able to read. I mean, you can communicate like this, but we need to be able to read to then be able to make decisions and think through and think critically to then communicate. So can you tell us just a little bit about raising our kids to be able to read and not hate it, maybe actually enjoy it a little bit?
Yes, yes. And so I mean, I could do a whole workshop on this, so I'm going to be really quick. But basically, teach your kids to read. I taught with phonics. I thought it was very simple. Um, but teach them to read, and then once they can read, give them everything possible that they can read that's easy and makes them feel successful. So, in everything, when you're homeschooling, you want to lead children from success to success to success, a challenge, then more success, 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 so that they're mostly feeling confident and then sometimes challenged. And so with reading, so they read all these easy readers, and then you start introducing classic literature like Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, and then you just keep going with classic literature. The reason I say classic literature is because a lot of the writing, even for adults in our culture, is at about a third grade level if you went 100 years ago. So if
Mhm.
we want our children to value freedom, they're going to have to read things by John Locke, they're going to have to read things by Edward Burke, and they're going to need to be able to read at a stronger level. So when you keep giving children classic books, the stories are amazing. It's going to build their vocabulary, it's going to help their reading, and they're eventually going to be interested. They hear about a topic, they'll think, oh, I'll pick up that book and read it. The way I really made sure that my children enjoyed reading, because that was my goal for them to enjoy reading. So I never assigned books until they were in high school. What I did is
Mhm.
I had a bookshelf and it had about 6 shelves and I filled it. They could read anything they wanted from that bookshelf. And they just had to tell me the book they read and I would write it down and I would say, "Did you like it?" And or who was your favorite character or what was your favorite thing about it? I never had them. I taught them how to write a book report and they wrote like 2 or 3, but that wasn't my goal because I wanted them to love to read and I wanted them to meet friends in make believe places and real places and say, oh, I want to go back. I want to read that again. So that was my goal. My son was my hardest and he just hated to read and he loved math, but he didn't like reading. And so I remember he got he got saved in like middle school and he came to me. He's like, Mom, I didn't read any of those books I told you that I read. And so this summer I'm going to read them all because now I want to live for God. And
Oh,
so then, but in high school, by the time he graduated from high school, his favorite book was The Count of Monte Cristo, which is like a 1,000-page book. So my
wow.
like eventually he learned to read. So I never gave up on him, but I always tried to find things that he would like, series that he would like. He loved biographies and I got him a lot of biographies. I got him like all these war books about, this bomber, this plane, you know. So it was really my goal. My goal the whole time was I want my children to love to read and to be able to read anything they want. So, and I just want to add this, if you have a child with a learning disability, don't just limit them to listening to audiobooks for the rest of their life. Maybe they need to read, like, listen to every other book audio because the reading assignments are too much. But if they're going to do audio, have them read along with the book and follow with the book because that is going to help them to become a stronger reader. There's also a lot of tools for kids with learning disabilities. I remember when I used to do reviews, I remember they had these little different colored strips that were
Yeah.
see-through that you could put down on the book. So don't give up on reading. I've met like 11th graders and they're like, I don't read, I just listen to audiobooks. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna challenge you to read. I had one student like that, and he said, okay, I'm gonna read this book. And we were reading Plymouth Plantation by
Mhm.
William Bradford. He didn't get the modern translation. He got the one from the 1600s. And he said, and I said, honey, this was the worst book that you will ever read in your life. And if you got through that, you can read anything. And he loved to read after that. But his mama told him he couldn't. He had a learning disability. And so he
Oh,
had a lot of drive to be able to read like the other kids in our homeschool co-op. But that's just one story. So I think reading opens the door. Even you have to read emails, you have to read texts, but reading is just such an open door to adventure. So I love reading. So I'm a very big fan. My parents were both big fans of reading too. So
well, and I think your story plays out. I know for me, you've got to get, if you have a child that doesn't like to read, continue to search for something of their interest. And you just have to be patient and give them grace, give yourself grace, because my son did not, I mean, he could read a book if, and he would do it, but did he enjoy it? No. And now he's 31 years old, and once he got out of college and he loves to read, we exchanged titles. But like that was 15 years of time just waiting, and you're
Yeah,
thinking, oh, next month they're gonna love to read. No, I mean, look, God takes time to work with me. So be patient and give
it was
yourself
12
grace. And
years for
that's
my son. It was
yeah,
12 years, yeah, and so wow,
and take it. We're
agree.
like, okay, our kids are grown. Take it from someone that's already been there, not someone that's in the same level as you are, and you both have 6-year-olds. So, anyway, so we have reading, we've got rhetoric. Then the next thing, what do you see as any kind of secret to writing effectively?
Well, I think if you can communicate an idea, then it's easier to write it. So if you can speak, it's easier to write. So what I would often do with my children is I would number one, I would like if I was asking them to write a paragraph, I we would read paragraphs together, see how this is a topic sentence and how these sentences or like see let's read this essay. This is so interesting. And so first of all, I think for writing, you have to be able to read the kind of writing that you're going to write. Children just don't naturally know how to write an essay. And if you give them the directions, but you don't give them an example, they still don't know what to do. So so I would always have my children talk to me. Well, talk to me. Tell me what you want to write about. And then we would just talk and I would, oh, that's a great idea. And so I guess the main topic would be what? And, kind of helping them think through. I had a pattern for teaching writing. I spent a couple of years on sentences because a good sentence makes or breaks a paper. And I still, I teach high school kids and I have some of them who can't write good sentences. So we spend a lot of time writing sentences and first, they were so young, they would dictate to me and I would write it. And then soon they could write their own. And then we wrote paragraphs and we wrote all kinds of different paragraphs. And we always enclosed our writing in a letter to grandparents
Oh,
because that teaches children early on okay, so you're writing this paragraph for grandma then you're going to write it differently than this paragraph that you're writing for Aunt Julie because she's interested in horses and, ag stuff, whereas grandmom is interested in books and knitting. And so it teaches them to think in terms of an audience, which is really
mhm.
important when you write. So then from paragraphs, we would actually move to reports, essays, and things like that in middle school. So we did a lot of basic writing and then whenever they wanted to write stories, you know, I'd say, "Oh yeah, write a story." And if they couldn't write well, they could dictate to me and I would, type it on the computer. So that was a really that was the basics. Then in high school, we did all the, like analyzing literature, writing a research paper. We wrote a novel. One year we wrote a novel. So, and fiction is very different than writing nonfiction. So I think my kids wrote every kind of essay, every kind of report. But I tried to make it really fun. And one thing I also did in high school was I'd say, okay, here's a paper from 2 years ago. I'd like you to turn it into a blog post. And they really enjoyed that. But blogging is a completely different kind of writing than writing an essay. So anyway, I did a lot of things like that. And like I said, we always shared our writing with other people because I wanted them to have in their mind an audience. Whenever I teach homeschool co op classes, I always have the kids read their papers out loud. And
Yes.
that allows them to have an audience. So I say, when you're writing this paper, look around the room. This is your audience, and you're going to read it out loud to them. And you want to write something they'll enjoy. So when I grade their writing papers, I always look for readability. Is it enjoyable to read?
Mhm.
Is it written for the audience? So and three of my children went into writing. So one
Oh,
became an editor at a magazine, and she writes now. She has her own business. She writes. My other daughter taught writing and literature at the local university, and now she's a stay-at-home mom. And my youngest daughter has written a screenplay and short stories and stuff like that. So they all ended up, three of them, in writing. Now, my daughter Juliana, who works for Verizon, says she hates writing, but she's actually a very good writer. She just doesn't like it. So,
that is so good. You know, you said something that I know we did a lot in the beginning years. It is easier for kids to speak sentences than to write their first few sentences. So
yeah,
if they speak it as a sentence, and I was the same thing. I would type up. Hunter would be talking to me about snakes or whatever he read about, and we would type it. Then the next day he would copy it or edit it. Eventually, it got to something. But the
yeah,
other thing is giving your kids a reason to write, and getting a grade is not a real life reason to write. You've
not at
got to
all.
have an audience. And if there's an audience, that alone can motivate some kids to actually do a better job because they feel like they're writing to a person. And if you're just writing for a grade, that sort of dull sometimes. And unless you're just got an academic kid and they just like, okay, I'll do whatever you say. But most kids are like, okay,
What,
whatever, just tell
what's
me.
the
Okay, that was great on writing. You know, we've got writing, then we have arithmetic, and I know there's some moms that have some fear. I was a math minor, and by the time my kids got in high school, I was like, what did I learn in my math minor years? I got to figure this thing out. I loved math in high school, but by then I didn't really care for math as much. So, what kind of tips can you give them? Because we do need our kids to be able to use math skills.
So I think my number one tip for math would be do math every day, and you know, put a time limit on it so it doesn't feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be here 2 hours to finish this lesson. But I think consistency is the most important thing with math. And be confident. Don't be afraid to hire a tutor for math or to put your kids in a co-op class for math, because a lot of kids, a lot, if mom hates math, then kids, it's hard for kids to like math. And I have a friend named Leanne, and she did so much tutoring in our church for kids, co-op kids, because their parents, their moms just hated math. I was like you when my son took calculus. I said, honey, no idea. I don't know. But so I would say make sure that they're scoring 90% or higher in on their tests, and they know why they got the problems wrong, and here's why. The early years, they learn so many foundational things, and a lot of times when I'm helping kids who have trouble with pre-algebra, with algebra 2, or geography, or geometry, it goes all the way back to fractions and decimals and multiplying and dividing. So what, my one child was really struggling with math, so I just repeated a grade. I just repeated a whole grade in a different curriculum, and she ended up joining this engineering club called Math Counts in middle school, and went all the way to state. So
Wow.
she wasn't dumb, she just needed more repetition. So I hear people say, well, why should they do repetition? Well, I would say that math is learning to get the problems right over and over and over again until you're solid. And it's great. I always started with math because I feel like it kind of gets all the neurons charged and working, like sort of the workout for the brain. But again, I would just do it every day. It's better to do a half hour of math every day than do like a slug session for 3 hours, because you're behind. And I if kids get behind in math, they get behind in math, and that means we do some math over the summer. That was kind of
Hmm.
how I looked at it. But I was real stickler with math, and as a result, the kids did well with math. And but they don't, it wasn't necessarily anyone's favorite except for Jimmy, my son. So
Well,
yeah.
I think you hit on another good point, mastery. I was a public school teacher and we did have a minimum, but and nowadays it doesn't matter if you know it or not. You just keep moving those kids through the school. What's the point? If those kids do not understand single digit division, they're not going to understand long division. So work on it. And you can find some fun activities to make it all work. There's lots of hands-on, and we're not going to go diving into all those different kinds of things. But I do believe mastery in math, because it is sequential and it keeps building
It is
on it, like you
sequential.
said, with geometry.
And you
So
know what, Carrie, that's a good point. Math is one of the few things that is sequential. Everything else you could learn, American
yeah,
Revolution and then ancient history, it doesn't matter. But math is sequential. And so if they don't learn the basics, they're always going to struggle.
yeah,
So, yeah.
so true. Okay, so after arithmetic, next we have got research. So how is that a tool? How would you encourage moms to be
Okay,
able to
well,
do
I
this?
think right now, if you say research, people just look things up on Google.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah,
would,
that's true. Or
so,
you know what? Okay, so my grandkids wouldn't look it on Google. I'm not going to do it because I've got a little Google machine. They just go, "Hey Google," and then they ask whatever that question is and let it speak to them. They don't even have to read it. They'll just listen. But anyway,
oh
go
my
ahead.
goodness, I always think, what if an enemy of the US just shut down our internet for a week?
I know.
It would be like, oh my goodness. So,
Might
but
be good.
I think it's important for kids to know how to find things in books, like how to read a textbook to find, the table of contents and how to
Yeah.
go find the subject you're looking for. How to look up how to use directories, how to use an atlas, how to use maps. They could use Google Maps, but how did they find stuff on Google Maps? And then just being able to go to different kinds of research books, like um, a dictionary, a thesaurus, um, an encyclopedia, and then actually to research, like to look things up and to find different books about it and research a topic, and especially in research to read about opposing viewpoints. I think
Mm.
that's very important, to read about this viewpoint and this viewpoint that are completely polar opposites. And I think that's an important part of research, because I feel like, the there's been a main point in our school system for years, and it's been like almost brainwashing kids. But we don't want to do the same thing. We want to
Mm.
make sure that our children know both sides of the issue, and then where we stand and why we stand where we stand logically, not just based on emotion. So I think that's an important part of research. It kind of ties in with rhetoric. And also, everything is research, from looking up a recipe and finding the best recipe to researching for a research paper. And so, one of the things about research is trying out different things until you find what's best, trying out different exercises till you find the one that works the best or you enjoy the most. So, research is really a lifelong thing, even if you are saying, "Hey, Google," you know, what is blah,
I
blah,
am
blah.
serious. When they're like 8 years old, I'm like, seriously? Oh, they go, "Oh, Gigi, that's okay. We'll go find here. Come here." And they take me over to their little machine and ask it a question. Sometimes they understand the girls, sometimes they don't, but oh well.
That's so funny. Oh my
I
goodness.
know. That is so good. And I like that idea of research is all different things. It's not just writing a research paper. My kids actually every year in high school had to write one research paper. And we just really, and it's the requirements in ninth grade were different than the 12th grade because hopefully they were growing in their research
Right.
skills as well.
And they do
So
have to write so many research papers in college. So that
yeah.
was probably really helpful for them.
Yeah,
So
now we got AI. So y'all go listen to the AI talks that we have in this summit because we're going to show you, no, you can't just go get AI to write your research paper. So we got a few little speakers on that. Y'all probably need to go
that's
listen.
how I need to listen to it, because someone mentioned it and I was like, "Oh, my children in my classes would never use AI." And they're like, hmm. Oh,
Okay, I froze. Just a second. There we go.
okay.
All right, the last one, we started with relationships, which I think is super important. We got a lot of academic things, right living, and that's the last one. But I don't think it's the least. So tell us a little bit about that and why you put that there.
Well, I put it last because it's kind of a sandwich of the academics
Oh,
with
yeah.
the relationship and then right living, because right living is weaving through everything, and you teach children to be polite, to be obedient, to work hard, not just with their chores but with their schoolwork. And so it just makes sense to um, and also there's something about living right, even before children give their hearts to Christ. When you live the right way, in a way that's moral, you you feel better. You don't have like
Mhm.
a lot of guilt, you don't have a lot of shame because you've done the right thing, you've worked hard, you've done what you need to do. So I feel like it's a confidence booster as well to have right living be part of a focus, but it makes teaching easier when you're focused on training children to have manners, to have virtue. It makes it easier to get school done because it's
Yeah,
just part of their character to, okay, this is kind of my job. I'm going to do it well. So,
that's so good. And I was thinking, I didn't mean to steal your thunder by saying what I said, but I was like,
no,
oh, relationships, right living, that's the most important. And then we got the
yeah.
academics in the middle. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a sandwich. And so
it really
just a
is.
reminder, like I think if you start with right living, you can become legalistic, you can become harsh. But if start with relationships and sandwich it with right living, I think it helps you have a really good balance between the
That
two.
is so good. Hey,
So
I know you've got a really good resource about these 7 R's that could help our homeschoolers. Could you tell people a little
yes.
bit about that?
So this is called the 7 R's. It keeps moving.
It did show for a second. There you go.
7 R's of homeschooling. And you can tell all my books have a little Florida flair. A lot of them do. But so it goes through each of the 7 R's I mentioned, how to teach them, practical resources. So it was, again, birthed out of that season where it was a necessity for me to major on the majors and minor on the minors. And so it's not like, oh, this is my theory, from my Ivy League tower, but this is where we had to live. And it really helped me kind of refocus and ending up like putting writing assignments and speaking conversational, making it like that's how we ended up putting book clubs in our literature classes and history classes, because I found out how important conversation was. Like we just would have conversations all the way down to my to my parents' house.
Mm.
So I really recommend the 7 R's. It's an easy read, and it goes through each one and how it's a benefit and how you can, in practical ways, it talks about if you have some issues with reading with your kids, and how to go step by step. So it's written for elementary, middle, and high school. So it's you can pick it up when they're still in high school and just sort of give an overview of your children. You know, if you pull your kids out of high school, out of a public school, and you bring them home, one of the things you want to do is you want to kind of evaluate where they're at in these, not with a test, but with just observing what are they able to do, what are they confident in, what do they still need more help. So this is another good tool for that.
That is awesome. So, whoever you're listening to this, look below and we will have a link that you can click on and go grab a copy of this excellent source. Because, I mean, this will give you practical tips to be able to implement these 7 R's and evaluate where your kids are. So, Meredith, thank you so much for being here. I am going to put a little note on there saying I'm sorry for the darkness on parts of the video,
I
but
know. I'm
we
so
were in the
sorry.
late of the day and the sun's going down and we couldn't get the light to work. But you know what? The content here is excellent. So thank y'all for just listening as well. And thank you for being here, Meredith. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I always love it. Love being here. Thank you.
All right. And I'm Carrie Beck with Life Skills Leadership Summit. We'll talk to you next time.